U.S. government has chosen to take the stance that they're taking now, which is kind of naive or maybe even stupid.
Okay. A few reasons. And I don't think it's necessarily specific to this administration. It's got its whatever style issues, but I think there are a few things that we need to be aware of. First, democracies are notoriously poor at strategy. And there are a few reasons for that. First of all, when the world comes to an end every 2 or 4 years, it's hard to think strategically. Bashar Assad, the president of Syria, was essentially under siege and is being eulogized every week, but it's not working. Okay. By the way, I predicted that he wasn't falling so quickly, but as an aside. But he's got some problems. He knows he can think strategically because he knows that 20 years from now, he's going to be in only one of 2 places. Either in the presidential palace or on the ground. So why not think strategically? In a democracy, and here I'm going to use the current administration only because it's current. Seriously, this is not unique to this one. When President Obama came into office 6 years ago, he knew that his first test was going to be in 2 years, the midterms. Okay? Whether he passed or not is a whole different question. He knew it. No secrets here. He also knew that in 4 years he was going to face a serious test, and he knew with absolute certainty that in 8 years he wasn't going to be president anymore. Okay? What that means is that he jumped onto a fast treadmill that was accelerating at its own rate, and his primary job was not to get thrown off. And again, I want to emphasize, this is not a uniquely Obama situation. Bush had the same thing happen 8 years earlier, and so on going back. Under those circumstances, thinking strategically is a bit of a problem. That's number one. Number two, it's even more difficult in the world of CNN. And here again, I want to remind you, I'm talking about the phenomenon, not the station. Okay, because CNN is measuring you on a minute-by-minute basis, and strategy doesn't work on a minute-by-minute basis. If CNN were around in 1944, they would have been calling for Eisenhower's resignation or firing the day after D-Day. Right? Those of us who know our history, the grandest amphibious landing, possibly the grandest operation, military operation in the history of the world. But let's face it, on June 7th, what did he have to show for it? The landing was on June 6th, for those who don't know your dates. Okay. What do you have to show for it? A strip of sand on the coast of Normandy? 10,000 casualties? Come on, get rid of this guy. Let's get somebody who knows what he's doing. Okay, problem number two. Problem number three. Strategy, the logical strategy, and this plays to the CNN issue as well. Strategic logic is paradoxical logic. In other words, it doesn't follow a linear path. Okay? The ancient Romans had a saying, "Qui vit pacem para bellum." He who wants peace prepares for war. That doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? You want peace, prepare for peace, get rid of your guns, right? No. Okay? But if you do something that's paradoxical, again, you're going to get jumped on. Now add to that, nobody wants to go to war. Nobody really understands these guys. People, I'm going to tell you something as an expert. We don't have a clue what's going on out there. So what do we do instead? I'm honest, I don't care. But what do you do when you're up at the top? You make it up as you go along. You don't go into the Oval Office and say, I'm clueless. You don't. That's what they don't pay you for that. Okay? All of that combined leads to poor, sloppy, naive policy. Because it's a lot easier to have a non-policy and then excuse it away, right? The Brotherhood, nothing to worry about, secular, moderate, non-violent, than to say, oh my God, we've got a problem, we've got to do something about it. And By the way, let me give you a deeper historical, because I really don't want you to think that I'm talking specifically about the current. At the end of November 1941, the War Department, as it was called in those days, sent out a warning message to the Pacific commands. Historically, that is known as the war warning message, because it starts with the words, "This is a warning of war." Pretty subtle, okay? The Japanese are on the move. We don't know where they're going. This is a week, 8 days, 9 days before what will be Pearl Harbor, okay? And it's warning the commands, Pearl Harbor, the Philippines, something's going on, heads up. But the reason I mention it to you is because of the last line of that order, right? This is a warning of war, and the Japanese are on the move, and all of that. Does anybody here know what the last line of that order was? I'll quote it for you verbatim. "It would be best if the Japanese fired the first shot." So they did. Why? Because nobody wants to go to war. And I understand it, I appreciate it. I think it should be a very, very difficult decision. But as I said earlier, and it's a bad decision.
Yeah.
But it isn't always the worst decision. The problem is knowing which is bad and which is worse. And that's part of the problem.
Thank you. Another question? Right.
In lieu of all the military activity and being such a small country, economy, like, how does your food prices compare to ours? Where do they come from?
First of all, we have a very good economy. You have to understand, Israel's a country that doesn't believe in miracles. We are a miracle.
Yep. Yes.
We have no resources, so we outproduce everyone. We are a food exporter to the United States, to Europe, food agriculture in general, by the way. We export tulips to Holland during their off season.
Yep.
Wow, right?
Yeah.
We're also a high-tech wonder. You know, people talk about boycotting Israeli goods. I say do it. Can I have your cell phones, please? And your laptops. So the economy is working very, very well under the circumstances. By the way, we survived the crunch of a few years ago better than any other country in the West.
Do you still have a pretty solid middle class?
We have a pretty solid middle class. Middle class is being eroded a bit, but I say a bit. But all in all, prices are higher. Gasoline is significantly higher. You get the family discount, we don't. So we're paying about twice as much as you for gas. Food varies. Fruits and vegetables are much cheaper in Israel and better. Meat is about the same. Specialty goods are higher. But all in all, it's livable. And with it all, we live our lives normally. And this is an important message, I think, for those who've been. Who here has been to Israel? Just show of hands. Okay. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not. Did you feel secure when you were there?
Yeah.
Okay. What you see on the news is not the reality of the day-to-day. Okay. There was an Israeli satirist named Ephraim Kishon, passed away a few years ago. He wrote about 40 years ago something that's just as true today, and that is that Israel is a country that has mortal threats on all of its borders, but you get your ulcer from the upstairs neighbor. In other words, we live our lives no differently there than you do here, and in many ways, much more secure than you were. I don't lock my doors at night.
Wow.
I dare someone to come into my house. and that was part of what I was talking about earlier in terms of the present continuous. We are winning against terrorism. So it works. With all the difficulties in there are, I don't want to make it sound like it's not good.
I've noticed that they were doing a lot of recruitment in Australia, like the ISIS ones, and they're very young, you know. Are they doing that here in the United States?
Is ISIS recruiting in the United States? The answer is yes. First of all, the internet has global reach. I don't think anybody really yet understands, I don't know if they ever will, what the attraction is. This is one of those things where there are answers, but there is no answer. All right, so there's excitement, and after all, beheading people is a lot of fun. We don't quite get what's going on there, but it's attracting people from here, from Europe, from other places. We're seeing a phenomenon. And by the way, every victory of theirs attracts that many more in that direction. But a number have gone from here, a number have been stopped from here. It's a growing phenomenon.
I'll just follow up on that one. You know, there's a lot in Facebook saying that, you know, this is a terrorist camp right here in this neighborhood. Is there any sign if ever we have a terrorist camp around Baldwin Park or something?
Well, I don't know the specifics. There are training camps in the United States. There are training camps. They're being run under the guise of Muslim recreational or educational or whatever. Which, by the way, anybody who's going to run a terrorist camp isn't going to put, you know, terrorist camp. And our honest, legitimate sensitivity to religious freedom, as it should be. And here I'm going to stop in the middle, and I want to say something that's very important for me to say to you. And I train organizations here and in Israel. I teach at Haifa University. I teach undergraduate students. And I tell them all what I'm about to tell you. If a Western liberal democracy stops being a Western liberal democracy in order to fight terrorists, the terrorists win. Okay? And if we start thinking we're going to do to them what they would do to us, then why bother fighting them? Let's just be them. We have to beat them on our terms, not on their terms. And therefore, our true, legitimate sensitivity to religious freedom, religious diversity, and all of that gives them a certain shield. We have to be very careful. We have to be very specific. Not, if anything, underdo it rather than overdo it, just as we are careful about our legal system and the presumption of innocence and everything that goes along with it. It's better to release one guilty or 10 guilty than put one innocent into prison. And here, they're taking advantage of it. We know that they are. And to a certain extent, you can close that gap a little bit, but you're never going to close it 100%.
Thank you. Let's go over here.
So what can we do? I know that I think we tend to be, we're just believing the Lord to take care of this, or the rapture is going to take place and we won't be here to deal with it. But how can we, as believers, be supportive and do what God would want us to do?
First, I have to tell you, before I give you a serious answer, I mean, this is not so nuts. I like to say that there are two chances for it all to work out, peace in the Middle East. What I call the natural and the supernatural. Okay, the natural is that Messiah is going to come.
Amen.
Okay. The supernaturals are going to work it out with penance. I'll give you a few ideas of an answer as opposed to a specific one, because I think the real specific answer is you have to know for yourself what you can do, what you're capable of doing, and not just in terms of human capability, but time, effort, whatever. Okay? So this isn't, but if you want to come over and join us, okay, do an assault rifle. You can always use an X-ray. Look, it starts on a very simple and basic level. Know more and talk about it. Okay? This is democracy. Democracy is about a number of things. Voting is the last among those. And by the way, not the least, but the last. It means informing yourself. Okay, an ignorant electorate is a sin.
Mm-hmm.
Inform others. I am not a great believer in the new media. It's there, but I'm not a great believer in it. I don't think it's terrifically effective. I think that one person standing and speaking to a few others is much more effective than all the likes on Facebook combined. And being active means, not after you've learned it, being willing to talk to others about it. Initiate the conversation. You want to take it up a level from there. You have representatives. I don't know how they stand on the issues. You should. They're not my representatives, they're yours. If they are in the right place, thank them, support them, because there are others who are pushing in the other direction, and that's important. If they're in the wrong place, push. That's how you have influence. And believe me on this, your influence is far greater than you think it is. Far greater. Many, again, I don't know the local political issues, but many contests are won by a ridiculously small number of votes. So I say that voting is the last. Don't think that your vote doesn't count, because everybody's vote counts. But being able to convince 5 other people is enormous. And they know it. They know, by the way, I don't have all the calculations, but they know if you call their office, they know what that equals in terms of relative value. It's not just you. If you had the initiative to pick up the phone and call, that equals a higher number than just one phone call, etc. So that's writing to newspapers, letters to the editor. I mean, the list is very, very long. But first and foremost, learn the material.
That was a great question. I'm joking over there.
It's true that countries like Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia funded ISIS and are continuing to fund ISIS?
Yes. A good deal of the radical Islamic funding in the world comes from those countries.
Yeah, it's from the counties.
And yeah, enormous amount. I can give you a number of possible reasons that don't necessarily contradict each other. One is that they are truly radical Islamic countries. Just because they sell us oil doesn't mean that they're okay. They are also trying to export. And what they may be doing, and again, this doesn't necessarily contradict answer one, is the equivalent of the way Churchill defined appeasement, which is feeding your friends to the crocodiles and hoping they eat you last. So, in the meantime, Al Qaeda and ISIS and all those guys, you go fight the jihad out there, and by the time you're finished, we'll be somewhere else. So.
Another question to you. I want to know if you have any idea about this, but ISIS they're an Islamic extremist group, but their name is a pagan deity of Egypt.
That's purely random. It's in English. Don't forget their real name is in Arabic. Okay, and they're more commonly in the Middle East referred to as Daesh. So yeah, nice try, guys. They don't speak English.
Yeah, I think we had your hand up here.
Yes.
With all due respect, I'm not being facetious, but Iran, Syria, any enemy of Israel, are you saying that these people almost have their hands on that nuclear weapon they're looking for.
Iran, yes.
Right. They so stupid to believe that if they hit Israel, that America wouldn't respond. In other words, could America be a deterrent to them attacking Israel?
Okay, could America be a deterrent, or are they so stupid as to believe that America wouldn't respond if they did? I don't know if stupid is the way I would describe it, although it's a possibility. I would sooner use the word miscalculate, and I want to explain what I mean, because miscalculate is not just adding 1 and 1 and getting 3. Although that's part of it. Okay, and there are many, many cases, including the Pearl Harbor that I mentioned earlier, that was in part a result of miscalculation. The Japanese miscalculated. They thought, and their intelligence told them, that America could outproduce them 7-1. And they figured 7-1, if we hit America early and cause it serious damage in the first round, we'll be able to stay ahead of the curve, basically. The problem is that the real number was 30-1. And as a result, they got Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I'm putting it short, okay? So miscalculations happen. And that was an American one in production. But let me give you a current, now here I will get to the current administration kind of a scenario. How many countries in the world today believe that America will act if it threatens to do so?
Not many.
Not many,
No.
right, okay. We have a problem. We have a problem. Because on that error, we can have nuclear war. Okay, and here, understand a few things. One, if Iran drops a nuclear weapon or detonates one over Tel Aviv, I really don't care what America's response is after that. It's too late. The threat is only good if it works as a threat. Okay, that's first of all. In other words, if they miscalculate, I've got a problem. So do a lot of other people. But I've got a problem. The likelihood of miscalculation is, I think, unreasonably high. I think we should also keep in mind there's a phenomenon that's called undue optimism, and it's a common problem in the outbreak of war. In other words, when countries go to war, including this one, the leadership tends to be unduly optimistic. Right? We're going to have the boys home by Christmas. Right? All right, we didn't say which year. Okay, and it's a common thread that runs through history. Okay, and we can go into the psychology of why, and once you've decided kind of, sort of to do something, you tend to back up your decision with. All of this is a possibility. I don't want them to have that capability. Because even by mistake, we're talking about catastrophe. That's the problem.
That can happen.
Let's go from here and then we'll go to
The question I have has to do with immigration policy and student visa policy. Here, it seems like, well, we know that it's a problem here.
Okay.
And what is it that Israel does different with those two areas?
We're very strict. Okay. Let me see how if I can do this in less than 2 hours. No, I'm going to try to shrink this down. America is an unusual country in many ways. I'm thinking about something very specific. Most countries in the world, at least the relatively old world, I'm not talking about the post-colonial regimes of, say, Africa and Asia. Most countries in the world are what are known as nation states. And And America is so divorced from that idea that you use the word nation and state interchangeably. Okay, they don't mean the same thing. A nation is an ethnic national identity group, and a state is the structure. Europe is made up almost entirely of nation states. Germany is the state of the German nation, Italy is the state of the Italian nation, etc., etc. America is a federation of 50 states, but there isn't a true American nation. Okay, in that sense. America is a nation of citizens. And it's an unusual case, if not unique. Nation states, unlike America, tend to be exclusive, in the sense that if you are not a member of the nation, we love you, but you're not becoming part of us. Now, that may sound kind of exclusionary, but here there's something else that, again, America doesn't really contend with, although maybe today a little bit more. When you're a really small country or a really small group, the only way you can protect your own democratic identity is by being exclusionary and exclusive. Okay? And that's what we do. Very simple. Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people, and Jewish is not just a religion, it's a nationality. By the way, the word religion does not appear in the Torah.
Wow.
God says, you will be, for me, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Mamlechet Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh. Not a religion, not a faith, not a belief, not a nation, a kingdom. The Jewish people's state is the state of Israel. And therefore, there's preferred immigration. I won't say exclusive because it's not exclusive, but preferred immigration to members of the Jewish people. And if you're not, it's a long and involved immigration nationality process. In terms of student visas, we have them. People can come and study for up to a year. They can renew for another year. But here again, we have another advantage. Some of our disadvantages are also our advantages. It's a very small country, which means we can keep track of who's where. We have, for a whole bunch of reasons, including security, very strict rules about identification. If you do not carry identification in Israel, you can be arrested. It's the law. We all carry ID cards. And if you're a foreigner in Israel, you carry a passport. And if you don't, well, you'll be eating at the state's expense for a few days. Again, part of that's the security situation, part of it is just who we are. And by the way, we're not the only ones like that, by any means. And that's why I say America is unusual in that case, not the rest.
Well, we wanted to try to finish by 9:30, so we got just a couple of minutes because some of us have plans for tomorrow and we need sleep.
Well, I don't have, I just have a 6 a.m. flight.
Go over here and then over here.
Yes, you were talking about information. Where can we get the right information in regards to that? And maybe, if you excuse me for another question, do you know anything about the Kurds? Because I heard in the news that they're the ones who fight ISIS and stand against them. So.
Okay. The information question is a very good one. I wish I had a really good answer for you. The best answer I can give you is to read, if we're talking about Israel, the best English language newspaper is the Jerusalem Post. Jerusalem Post, its website is jpost.com or something like that. You can Google it. I say the best because it's still a newspaper. And ultimately, the only thing you can believe in a newspaper is the date and the price. And the price is negotiable. But, and here's an important but, I do this for a living when I'm home and not moving around too much. I usually read 4, 5, 6 different newspapers online every morning, only to verify the basic facts. Their analysis and opinion I read also largely to keep my blood pressure up. There are a few commentators worth reading, but for the most part not. I use the newspapers for the classic journalism W's, who, what, when, where. Skip the why, they don't know. Okay? And be disciplined, because we become, and they do it this way, TV news does it even more so, we become junkies. Okay? We don't need most of the information that they're pumping at us. And I'll give you a very simple example, and this is more from the electronic and from TV kind of news, but it works in all of it. And again, I hate to sound flip about it, but I'm not, but this is part of our reality. Bomb goes off in Jerusalem. Stay tuned for this breaking story. People, there is no breaking story. It's over. Okay? Number one. Whatever number of people tragically, unfortunately, are killed and injured, that is not going to change enough to make a difference to any of you. Okay? Because the truth is, it doesn't make that much of a difference to me either, unless I happen to know one of the people. If it's 6 or 7, doesn't matter, 60 or 70, either 6 or 60 makes a difference, but that's not going to change once the initial information comes out. In other words, that idea of, I've got to stay tuned and watch that loop, which, by the way, you're watching, if you're watching on TV, you're seeing ambulances running in a loop hours after the traffic has returned to normal. Okay? And it's hard, listen, they're not stupid. They do it in a way that makes it hard to, we're going to feed you another little bit and another little bit, and stay tuned. We've got incoming breaking news. We'll be right back after the word from our sponsor. Okay? It's hard to detach, but that's also part of discipline. We saw it on 9/11. How long were we addicted to that? Okay? So the basic, and that's it. Besides that, background information comes from journals and literature, in other words, learning the material. And then the news also becomes somewhat less important in terms of its depth. And it goes back again to the W's. What happened, where, what was the magnitude, and move on from there. As far as the Kurds are a tragedy in the sense that this is a nation that was chopped up by the colonial powers after World War I, and placed the borders of 4 different states cut through their national territory. They're fighting ISIS because ISIS is fighting them. ISIS, in its wackiness, doesn't believe that they're Muslims. What do you want from me?
Why did America turn their back on them?
What?
Why did America turn their back on them?
Why did America turn their back on them? Bad decision making. An unwillingness to go back. The last I heard, I haven't seen the news in 24 hours. I observed the Sabbath, so I've been out of touch. So it's possible that some of the stuff that I said tonight was wrong. 24 hours is a very long time. But the last thing I saw before shutting down yesterday was a decision to send 1,500 American troops into Iraq. In other words, a little late, but it's starting to be understood. America wanted to disengage, and again, for a whole bunch of good and bad reasons, and sort of step back. Now they're in the middle of it. But the Kurds are a story. I didn't do that any justice. I can't. That's not a course. It's a degree.
All right, thank you.
Okay, just going back to the immigration, I know you have the problem, I think it would be a problem, is you do have Palestinians or that are members of, that I guess belong to the state of Israel. And how do you handle that without them? Their idea, I think, to my mind, is you get married, you produce more children, and eventually we'll take over. So how are you handling that?
Actually, we're handling it in a very interesting way. We're educating them. About 20% of the Israeli population is Arab. Most of them Muslim, some of them Christian. The other 80% is Jewish. And that ratio has stayed relatively stable since 1948. Now, I don't know what's going to be. One of the things I learned, I My degrees are in sociology. One of the things I learned is that linear demographic projections are always wrong. Okay, and if you say, okay, here's the data where I am, this is what's going to be 30 years from now, it could be above or below, but it's never going to be there. Okay, so stuff can happen in the interim, but interestingly enough, among the Arabs who are citizens of Israel, who by the way have full rights, and they vote and they have members in parliament and they're judges, and the director of the hospital nearest where I live is an Arab, and this is not tokens, okay? Is that, not very shockingly, they behave just like everybody else, and that is that as education and income goes up, birth rate comes down. And part of the reason for that is that women end up getting educated and going into the workforce, and they don't feel like having 15 kids because they become lawyers and doctors and Indian chiefs and all of that, like everybody else. And when you go into the middle class, you don't want to ruin it by having so many children that you can't maintain them. And so we've seen their birth rate drop significantly, and that's the kind of soft solution to the problem. The Palestinians of the West Bank and Gaza are not citizens of Israel. But that's a whole different story. They're on the other side of the line. That's an entirely different issue.
Thank you. Appreciate your response. Appreciate all your questions. Your Hebrew dialect, and I just wonder if maybe you can give us a prayer or a blessing in Hebrew before we leave.
Psalms 23.
I would just say